My name is Alex Sadolf,
And I'm Brandon Cobb.
and this is the Land Development Accelerator.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. So the reason we wanted to have you on is, everybody here, we're all in the land development business. Some people have some deals they're working on. Some people are just starting out. Some people have never done a deal before. And as you know, a key player in a successful development is the civil engineer. And I would argue that it's probably the most important player because I've worked with bad civil engineers before and I've paid a lot of money. I've worked with great civil engineers before. I've worked with
Yeah,
busy civil engineers before. And I think that a lot of times as developers, we get very frustrated because we're like, why is it taking so long? Like, what is going on here? So I thought it
sure.
would be fun to give everybody a little taste of what your world looks like and how you work with developers. And so I've got a list of questions that we'll kind of jump in. But before we do, guys, if you're able to, turn your camera on, show Kelly some love. We're going to get some Q&A here in a little bit. This is going to be a whole lot of fun. So put your cameras on if you can. Kelly, for those that don't know who you are, can you give us a little bit of context? Like, what's your story and background? How'd you get into this game?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Kelly Frank. I work with Kinley Horn. So I'm based here in Nashville. I've been in the industry for 11 years. So I graduated from University of Virginia, UVA, and I worked for Kinley Horn in Northern Virginia for about 4 years before I moved to Nashville in 2018 to support some of the growth here. So been here ever since. I love it. And my practice area, I've done a lot of different things. I have done municipal roadway design. I've done traffic. I've done public and private land development. But really, for the past 5 or 6 years, have been focused specifically in single family residential. Has been my bread and butter. So we have a large growing team here in our Kinley Horn Nashville office doing residential subdivisions and that type of work. So townhomes, detached, large, small, kind of all types, which has been really fun. It's a really great market to be a part of. Definitely challenging. Lots of tricky things to navigate, as you mentioned, and but it's a lot of fun. So happy to answer any questions that you'll have.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So, when should a developer typically engage with a civil engineer? In other words, are there any times where you're just frustrated with you, like, dude, you're wasting my time, like you don't have this thing ready, set up yet? So, when should a developer typically engage with you?
I mean, I think as early as possible always helps. I mean, even if you're just looking at a piece of land and have a couple questions about whether or not it's viable, somebody, civil engineer or a land planner who I partner with and have kind of on my team as well, we can take a really fast look and give you at first glance if there are any deal breakers and be like, don't waste your time. So, there's a couple of quick things that we can tick down the list just to make sure that a piece of property is even viable before you pursue an LOI or spend time kind of digging into what you can actually put on that piece of property. So as early as possible always helps. And then, I would say generally, if not before you get an LOI, then as soon as you have one, we can help you navigate all the steps of how much density can I put, what would a development look like, what are the utilities like, anything else like that. So we're often the first call, I would say.
Yeah. And how do you guys typically determine the highest and best use? Because I know that's a big value add with the engineering, and especially people just starting development. The highest and best use of the land is a pretty big factor in it. What do you look at to determine that?
So we always start with the municipality's published guidance. So there will be existing zoning on a property that states here's what the city says should be done on this property. There can also be overarching land use plans that even go kind of look a step higher and say, okay, maybe there's an existing characteristic in this area, but maybe we want there to be a different future vision. And so there can be more than just the current zoning on a property that might influence, what can be developed there, what the
Mhm.
municipality wants to see there. Um, and then, particularly if you're looking at a piece of property that is maybe in a county jurisdiction that you want to annex into a city to be able to put more density on it, that's something that we explore a lot for our clients is, hey, if you develop in the county, you can do 5 acre lots, but if this property can be annexed into the adjacent city, then all of a sudden, you can fall into a zoning category where you can do 1/2 acre lots to get, a lot more density on that piece of property.
Yep.
So we always start with what's published, and then, talking to y'all, to the folks who are looking to develop the property and understanding your vision. And a lot of times we can, help you sort of finesse that vision and communicate that to a municipality. And if it's something, if it's a really exciting development to them, then we can explore things like plan unit developments or types of projects that are maybe different than what the municipality has zoned, but bring a benefit to that community and offer them something that they wouldn't get otherwise. And so we can help you like craft a pitch to a municipality that will make it more likely for them to approve your use and typically give you more density than you would otherwise get.
So you're actually going in and, okay, got this parcel, reading the zoning regulations, looking at the overlays. I mean, you're doing the hard work, right? And we show this in our community, and we actually show how to build these custom GPTs with ChatGPT on how to like find this information and upload the bylaws, upload the zoning, the overlays into it to kind of help it navigate. But that's what you're doing. You're interpreting what that overlay or what that zoning regulation is to see what the city might deem like the highest and best use, and then basically communicating that to the developer, whoever your client is.
That's right. Yep. Great summary.
What do you wish that developers knew about your role that maybe they don't?
It's a good question. I mean, I think I wish, more developers understood how, if you bring the right engineer into the fold, like we can be much more than just the person who produces a set of plans that you need to develop something, right? Like we can be an advocate for you with the municipality, with stakeholders. Like there's just a lot more. I think to your point, working with a great engineer, the difference is that a great engineer can really help communicate with all the interested parties and really kind of make the process smoother as opposed to just, generating a set of paper plans and turning them over to you. So really like having a partnership as opposed to just seeing it as like a commodity. That's the space I like to be in. I want to work with folks who on their most important, their complex projects more so than like, okay, you're an engineer, I'm going to find the cheapest one and just, get the job done and move on. Like, I think we can bring a lot of value when we are engaged from the beginning and kind of, when we have that partnership together to bring these projects to life more so than just, commoditizing it.
I remember the first time I did a community hearing, and I'm just like, oh, I'll show up and explain the development and everything. We had our pictures and everything there, and it's the first introduction. And luckily we had our civil engineer there. And thank goodness he was there, because I would have been deer in the headlights, lost with some of the questions I was getting.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he knew how to navigate the question in a way that kind of put it, because there were some pretty aggressive questions. People show up to those community hearings, and it's not the people that are in support of development, hint, hint, right? Like
Not
those
usually, no.
people don't show up like, this Thursday night, I'm going to heard this development. I'm really in support. I'm going to go show up and show my support. No, it's the people that don't want it to be there. And the city wants to hear all those comments. And having a civil engineer there, they can help navigate those comments and kind of set them down gently sometimes, or not. I'd say like, I'm nicely show how stupid some of the comments were, I think is the more unpolitically correct term of how doing it. I was like, okay, that sounded way better than what I was going to say, because I was going to say something to make the person sound like an idiot, but I wasn't sure how to say it in that manner. And I don't want to do that, but thank goodness they're there. So that was a pretty eye-opening experience. When you say partnership, what are some of those things that stand out um, that you can do as a service that kind of gets you away from being a commodity? Obviously, I just kind of named one, right? Like showing up to the community hearings as well, helping navigate those questions. What else comes to mind?
Um, well, as an example, right now I'm helping a client work through the city that they're developing in has a specific requirement for some additional fees. It's part of a TID district, so basically, like if you're developing within this district, you have to pay into this established fund for improvements on a particular roadway, and so we're helping them kind of review the paperwork about it and make sure that they're covered from a legal standpoint. Not that we're giving legal advice, but just reviewing the content in that document to make sure that everything is correct and kind of helping them navigate this process of only paying what they're obligated to pay and helping them figure out, sure, what is our true contribution that needs to be made to this district, as opposed to just letting the city say, well, you owe us $100,000. Like, we've been sort of advocating for them and helping them work through that process. So things like that are just beyond actually producing a set of plans. I would say too, like, I have another project that has an offsite roadway component that required additional easement acquisition and right of way. And so we've helped our client, like, from start to finish, go through that acquisition process. And so have connected them with negotiators who can go out and facilitate that with the property owners along the road that we need to collect those easements from. So we make that connection and just sort of help them stay organized to acquire the property they need so that their construction can stay on schedule. So really just like any portion of the development process that y'all have going on, like, we want to jump in and help. We want to, we have good relationships with municipalities that you're working
Yeah.
in, and usually can leverage those to help you. So
Yeah. I mean, it takes a lot of the heavy lifting, because I think people get a little concerned when they first get in development. They're like, oh my gosh, like there's so much stuff and I don't know what I know. A good civil engineer can take care of most of that stuff, right? A
for
lot of them
sure.
can even turnkey it, where they're showing up, helping it push through. Like they're there with you at the um like the votes, right? When they're talking, it's not just you standing in front of the council or the planning commission answering these questions. It's the civil engineers there right beside you, talking through it too. You're not on this
Mhm.
journey alone. Like that's huge. How do you balance what the city and municipality wants with what the developer wants?
Oh, such a good question. It's it's tough. It's such a case by case thing. Obviously, anything that's written in regulations, like, we generally have to follow, right? There's only so much flexibility when something is truly codified, but I think it's knowing the code well enough to recognize when the municipality is asking for things that aren't necessarily written in the code. I think that's a really um, important skill, to be able to be like, hey, I understand what you're trying to do, but, like, show me where this is written in the code that I have to do it this way. Like, as a professional, my opinion and the design that I'm putting forward meets your code, meets your regulations, and satisfies, the requirements of, like, good engineering judgment. And so I think that's a big one. Is really just kind of finding when they're trying to just get more out of you, and maybe giving them some things that are low cost or easy to accommodate, but also pushing back when they're starting to overreach and recognizing where that line is.
Say that last part again, because that is very important.
Yeah, recognizing where the line is, pushing back when they're overreaching, and recognizing that you have a right to only be subject to what is codified as long as you're proposing a design that is sound engineering. So
Yeah. So sometimes these city officials, right, they're not developers, right? They're elected officials and they think, oh, I'm an elected official. It's my way or the highway. Not
mhm,
always the case. Yeah, they have to abide by their, the laws, the rules and regulations. And a good civil engineer can tell you when they're overreaching
yeah,
and have to point that out. And there might have to be a polite letter from your attorney at some point outlining that to get that obstacle removed. Sometimes we've had to do that. But this is why a lot of times the city will hire their own attorney, their own counsel that can interpret things and kind of tell them like, hey, like, yes, you can do that. No, you can't do that. Like it's already zoned for this. You're gonna have to put something with X amount of units on it, right? Like that
that's
you
right.
can't tell somebody not to do something they are legally allowed to do with their project.
Yep.
Where do you see most of the entitlement process get held up, and what can developers do to prevent that?
I think when we're talking about entitlements specifically, and so that would be, when you're trying to do a more intense density than maybe what the city has allowed by their code. I think the hardest thing is if you're coming into that situation without having done your sort of background discussions with council members or commissioners or staff about what you want to do and why you think it is a benefit to the community, you're going to struggle. The more different your proposal is than what they would expect on that piece of property, I think the more legwork you need to do up front to get the right people on board to have a chance at success. Like I think developers struggle when they bring us, they say like, we want to do X on this property that allows Y. And there's just not a lot of selling points that we can give to a municipality to help push that through, right? You got to have some selling points. You got to be able to talk about like how it's good for the community or how it may align with a future land use plan or some of the city's desire or the municipality's desires for like that area. So I think like having that story and doing the legwork up front to have those like closed door conversations before you get up to the podium and
Yeah.
try to convince people there.
Well, you just played in my next question perfectly, which was what are some things developers can do to help expedite that entitlement process? And you just kind of named a couple, like meeting with the city, those closed doors conversations beforehand,
Right.
making sure you get a general idea, getting feedback on it before it actually goes to vote. What else comes to mind? What are some other things developers can do to maybe remove some future obstacles or speed up the entitlement process?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest one because I mean, we talked about like the partnership between the engineer and the developer. Like, there are some things that we just can't do, right? Like, we can help get those meetings, and we have those relationships, but like, y'all need to be out there, like, getting to know council people, commissioners. Like, that's really important. And people want to work with people they know and they trust. And so if they've met you a few times, they trust that you have good intentions. That's going to smooth the way for sure. I think doing community meetings ahead of votes and things like that. It's not always required, but sometimes that can be really helpful if you work with the commissioner or the whoever the council person is to set something up so that you can talk to the public about what you want to do, and then you can even like if the public gives you a couple suggestions, then you can talk about how, oh well, we've incorporated this and that citizens in this district have asked for. I think you know that can be that can show some forethought before you get up to the vote, like, hey, we really want to work with your community and be part of your community. I think also having a really good vision of what you want to do. So like renderings, sample projects, like things that you've done elsewhere that show that you're bringing a good quality development can really go a long way. And that's something that you can share with, again, with the public, with commissioners, when you meet with them ahead of time. So showing
Yeah.
them that like you're legit, you're not trying to put up something cheap that's going to look terrible, that you want to do something that's quality, that really helps.
Yeah, 100%. Alex, you were bouncing up and down there. What did you want to say? I know
Dude,
she said something
it
that
was
you hit
literally
on.
everything that so we teach this stuff, and we just talk about before you start doing anything, before you start looking for land. Well, like in the coursework, it talks about don't start without doing this. Don't even go to the next modules. Like figure out what area you're talking about, and I need you to go to the council meetings. I need you to review the minutes. I need you to understand what matters to every single commissioner, to every single council
Yeah.
person. Are they a teacher? Are they a single mom? Do they have dogs? So they may want a dog park. They may want a playground in their subdivision. And we need to talk to the planning director to really get the heartbeat of that planning commission. Which way is the flag swaying, this year? Maybe they want townhouses, maybe they want single family homes. And then our responsibility as developers is to better a community, and that is to listen. And that's why God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. And so we must listen to these elected officials that represent their constituents. So if we can get their buy-in, and if we can make money making their vision come true, that's a win-win. So when I think Kelly, you brought up a great point saying, hey, like talk to the community and see what they want. And then when you come back from that concept plan, incorporating those things, it is so important. And like be genuine, like you said. I mean, for me, it's very important that I am a genuine person. I was a single dad. I am married. I'm in the military. Like I talk to people about who I am, like because we need to. They'll like you if they like you and if they like you and they trust you, they'll do work with you. And then sometimes they'll ask you for things that just don't work. I just sat down with a councilwoman Gamble and about a project where they were talking about they want only single family, and I was like, well, that's not going to work here, and only be townhomes, and this is why. And there's just no other way. But I gave her the facts. I showed her the closings. I showed her what's actually moving. I showed her the realities, and she's like, oh my God, I didn't understand it was like that bad. So, and then that education process, they'll trust you once you're like very open and you're vulnerable. And then when they see your face more than once, and you're not like, hey, I want to put like a Taj Mahal here. Like, who the hell are you? What are you talking about? And then leveraging the people. So yeah, Kelly, you like mentioned all those things, like, and just, it's like, I think that stuff is just so important. So thank you. Yeah,
absolutely. And Alex makes a great point. Like before you even meet with anybody in person, like just going to the meetings and listening, and like you can learn so much. Like anytime I am going to commission for a project, I try to sit and listen and just hear what else is on the agenda, how people are responding to it. Like you can learn a ton just by hanging out and taking notes and seeing what's going on in these places. So
Yeah. What are some common mistakes that you see developers make?
Let's see, common mistakes. I think well, in the current climate, like construction costs are continue to be volatile. I mean, it's not as bad maybe as it was COVID times, but things change pretty quickly. And so I would say like if you prepare an upfront budget for a project when you're in your entitlements phase or something, make sure that you have plans to adjust that budget periodically as you kind of move through your process. I think projects take a while to get permitted. That's just the reality of things in Middle Tennessee. Costs are just ever evolving. So I would definitely make sure, don't just use the number you started with, like get a gut check on it as you move forward, as more things come up and as we understand more. Because the reality is, when we put something through entitlements, we just can't always anticipate everything that's going to come down the line as we progress that design.
Right.
So have contingencies in your budgets and check them often. and just make sure, you're working with your engineer on that. And then, yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff we already talked about with respect to entitlements, right? About kind of being prepared for that and not going in blind, doing your homework before you show up. I think, let's see, those are two that I have. And I think checking in with your team, even if Alex and I have a weekly call, like even if that call only lasts 5 minutes on any given week, like having some standing time when you're going to be able to talk to your development team or your design team on a project really helps. And I think it helps keep us organized on the design side, because we know we'll be talking to you at 3:30, and so we'll be prepared for updates and be able to share that. So I think as you progress projects, setting up recurring times to talk with your team is important to keep up with schedules and things like that. So
Yeah, that battle rhythm's really, really important.
yes, yeah.
Kelly, I've got a question, or want you to kind of elaborate on it real quick. So one project that I'm working on now, for instance, we redesigned it, and the initial, I mean, I'll tell you, it was Gresham Smith that designed it. It was just over designed, right? So it was just like, it was an area where it didn't need underground detention. It only had 80 lots or 79 lots. It could have gotten 89 lots. It was more fill. So it was curb and gutter rather than extruded curb. And this is like in a tertiary market. So like, what steps do you take in civil design to ensure that your product that you're going to present to the client is actually the product that is needed? So if it's like a cost-effective neighborhood, like how do you delineate, how you design something?
Well, I would say, you would hope that whenever I approach a property, I'm always, my first questions are like, what regulations are we subject to? What is the goal of this property? Like, what are the client's expectations related, like you said, to, where will the houses sell? Like at what tier? What are we trying to do? And then I think it's incorporating rounds of quality control. That's something that we take really seriously at Kinley Horn, and that's where we have the opportunity to, somebody puts a plan together and they put curb and gutter on it because that's what they're used to doing. We can catch that before it goes to you and say, okay, we know we don't need to do curb and gutter here. Let's not do it because it's more expensive. So that's what we do on the internal side. And then, I think for y'all as developers, like knowing, you're not engineers, you don't need to be, but having like a short list of those high cost items and being able to just like flip through a plan and see the things that are going to be high dollar, and just ask the engineer about it and be like, why did you choose to use this particular, design tenant? And, you mentioned a few, like, what type of curb and gutter do we need? What's our, how is our stormwater being handled? Are we doing expensive underground vaults versus just a, dry detention basin, things like that? That's something that you'll start to pick up and know what those high cost items are, and you can ask those kind of pointed questions and make sure that there's a good reason for it.
Sure. Like one of the things that we like was the curbs again, and then putting sewer outside of the roadway and making sure that the water is outside of the roadway, especially when it's gravity and it's pretty deep. That's a lot of rock to backfill. So we're just asking the city to, hey, could you allow us to put it in the rear utility easement, or if we have depth, or maybe in the front, which I know would suck if we have to fix it. But some cities are like, yeah, I actually don't want to cut up the road or whatever. So yeah, I just seen some engineers that are just used to like downtown Nashville. So it's like, oh yeah, we have to have underground detention. It's like, no, you don't. That's very costly. We shouldn't do that. But yeah, so and can you speak to and I know you said like, yeah, you Kinley Horn, what you guys do, but can you speak to like what is the breadth and scope of y'all's capabilities, and And then outside of your, Kimley Horn, uh, who do you guys partner with and make things happen? Because there's so many different studies that have to happen, and
Yeah.
because we've kind of
So
gone through that.
great question. So Kinley Horn in our Nashville office, we offer surveying services, land planning, obviously civil engineering. We do not do geotech. So we partner with folks, other geotech firms in the area. We do not do, or generally at least do not do environmental permitting. So if you have a lot of stream crossings, anything above and beyond your standard land disturbance permit with TDEC, we typically partner outside of Kinley Horn for that work. There's great firms who specialize in that we like to work with. But generally everything else up to the building, we can handle. So, putting your construction documents all together, stormwater design, wastewater design, and calculations, all that good stuff. I mentioned we do offsite roadway work. Our Kinley Horn group has, civil engineers like me who are doing, development with developers on the private side, but we also have folks who specialize in public road design, traffic studies, so we can pull those partners in whenever those services are needed. And then, once the plans are approved, we can help with final plats, construction phase services, all that good stuff. We have a structural team too, so you need a bridge design, or retaining walls that you need to look at. We have that in-house as well. So that's a big thing for us. We like to try to provide as much as we can under one roof to make it easier for y'all to the extent that we can.
I have a question for you guys. How do you potentially, let's say that I am looking at a piece of land and I'm not super experienced with development. As we all know, you don't quite know what the development costs are going to be until you get those civil drawings, right?
Yep.
A good seasoned developer can ballpark it, look at worst case, look at, the geotech report in the rock, bringing you guys in, how does a developer work with a civil engineer on the front end to determine if potential site may not be worth pursuing? Because we've made this mistake. I've bought land before it was approved and not designed, and the design costs were way more than the development costs were way more than I thought it was going to be. Like, made a big mistake there. Like, how does a developer work with you to even decide if they want to pursue a specific project?
Sure. So we do it a number of different ways. I would say, the most common is that the developer would initially contract with us to do some due diligence on the property. So just kind of that desktop research. And then whatever the entitlements package is necessary, if that's like planned unit development or any other type of rezone. And then we would also do a preliminary engineering package as part of that sort of first phase. And that's always, the layout of the site, preliminary grading, and preliminary utility layout. And so if you have those kind of three sheets, what type of streets you're doing, where your utilities are going, and generally what the grades look like on the site, you can pull a pretty good initial cost. A lot of the contractors in the area will price based on that for you. They like to have first looks at things. And so I know a lot of our clients will go to a contractor with, that 30% set of plans and get a really realistic first look. Sometimes sometimes clients want some info a little bit earlier, where we might just do some due diligence straight up front, which is obviously less cost initial, or we can, just do that grading plan, as soon as we have a layout penciled out. If you're concerned about the grades, it basically through that due diligence, we might figure out, okay, what are what are the concerns, what are the things that might be big ticket, and then help recommend to you, here's what I would do next, to sort of flesh out those big cost items. So
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, I can't tell you how valuable that is, what she just said. That removes a lot of your risk on your first few projects, right? Doing that initial hiring them to do that DD, flushing out what some of those potential high costs are, getting that preliminary grading, because your biggest costs are going to be like your grading and your utilities,
that's
right?
right.
I mean, it's those two. So
Yeah.
if you can kind of get an idea about those and get those bid out, that's going to answer a lot of the big picture question. The roads and stuff, you can get a linear foot cost for the roads and contractors. That's kind of easier. But yeah, you're grading your utilities. Those are your big question marks. But for doing your first couple deals, that's huge, guys. Being able to pay for that DD on the front end.